Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. I'm Sally Ganga from College Coach. This is going to be a great show on the nuts and bolts of the application process for rising high school seniors and their parents. For the second segment, we'll be talking about different ways to apply early to schools, such as early decision, early action, and priority deadlines, and why you might want to. And in the third, we'll be giving you some tips on creating your application activity list. But first, my guest, Chrissy, who, if you're watching this on the videos, you'll see here. Chrissy Foran, College Coach Finance Educator, is here to tell us about securing financing for the upcoming year in college. So I think this is probably like on a lot of people's minds right now. Chrissy, I'm guessing you're getting a lot of phone calls right now around this.
Yeah, tons of, that's what most of our calls are right now. It's just kind of oh my gosh, what do we do now? Like it's summer, what's supposed to happen? What's next? And, really simple questions as terms of like, do we teach them how to do laundry? But then other things of, oh my gosh, how do we pay for this? So yeah, it's fun. I love having these phone calls. So.
The one thing I can say is do teach them how to do laundry. That seems like a good thing to do maybe when they're sophomores or ninth graders,
They teach them how to boil water and make soup in their dorm rooms and keep their room clean. And, it's amazing the things you don't think about.
Scramble some eggs, that's a good basic meal. So
exactly.
All right. So what are some of the ways families can get help with financing for the upcoming year?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we spend most of the fall talking about filling out FAFSAs and applying to schools. And then the spring is, here's our award letters and this is what the college is helping us with. And now suddenly families are trying to figure out, how do we pay for the rest of this? So I think one of the things that families can really do is to take a look at their current budget. See if there's any room that they can make a kind of a monthly payment to the school. So most schools offer payment plans now. So the more you can pay out of pocket, the less you'll need to borrow and pay interest on later. Now that your child's out of the house, are there any expenses? You may no longer have like tutoring or sports or dance classes. So kind of look back in your budget and see if there's any way to redirect any funds to have a monthly payment plan at the school and check into that at the school that your child is going to.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So, you mentioned most schools do offer payment plans. So what do those look like?
Most schools nowadays do offer some kind of a way to pay monthly rather than paying in one lump sum at the beginning of each semester or the beginning of each quarter. So some schools could offer a 12-month payment plan. Others might offer 9 or 6 months. It can really depend on the school and what their plan is. So usually the nice thing is that they don't charge interest on the payments that you make, but schools will usually charge a fee for using the plan or setting up an account. So the fee could be a couple of $100s per semester. It could be a percentage of tuition. It's really up to the school to determine what their plans are. So it is important to talk with your child's college, or a lot of times they'll have information on the website, so you can just search for payment plans on their site to kind of see what the options are.
Mm-hmm. I would think that they would send links to that information too, when every time a student is admitted, typically there's some sort of a portal, and I would hope that they would link all that information in there.
You hope so. Sometimes, college websites and portals can be really confusing. We spend time on the phone with parents, kind of walking them through what things to look at in a portal once the student gets a login, and it can still be confusing. So I think if all else fails, talk with the financial aid office or, get online and just search their website for payment plan to see what you can find.
Yeah, it is true. The usability of websites can vary dramatically. I've been doing some research and running into some dead links, like I click on a link and I keep getting sent around and around and around. It's a little frustrating. So
it'd be nice if it was all uniform, but sadly it's not.
Yeah. All right. So if the payment plans don't cover everything, what other options do families have?
Yeah, so I really encourage families to continue to look for free money in terms of, private scholarships. And, students can do that all 4 years of college. There are millions of scholarships that students can search for. And, again, the more money you can find, the less you have to borrow and pay interest on. And it can be a very overwhelming task to look for private scholarships, but I think it's worth doing, a search just to kind of see what's out there, what's local. to your state or your city, just checking with more local type organizations. So looking for free money, I think, can really help. Families can also look into borrowing to help pay for educational costs. So the government offers loans to both students and parents. There's private loans available through various lenders in the states. And then some states even offer private loans through their own state. So states like Texas, New Jersey, Massachusetts, they all have private education loans that sometimes offer good rates as well and good repayment options. So it's important to do some research if you do want to or need to borrow, just to see what loan is best for your family or for your student.
And what can the loans be used to pay for? Can they really pay for everything? Are there limitations on it?
Yeah, so whether it's a federal or a private loan, you should be able to pay for any educational costs, that's part of the cost of attendance of the college that they're going to. So that would be things like tuition and fees, room and board, books, any personal expenses the student might have throughout the year. So if you need extra money for laundry detergent or any food or any things that the student might need to help get them through the year. So you should be able to borrow up to that student's cost of attendance, which the schools all have a cost of attendance. So it's a good idea to know what that is for your college. So, but one thing to keep in mind is that when you do borrow a loan, you do want to make sure that you apply for the amount that you need for the entire academic year. So you don't want to borrow, just enough to get through the fall term, just enough to get through and then later have to borrow for the winter or the spring term. Federal student loans, or other than federal student loans are based on credit, and your credit will expire after 180 days or 6 months. So you do want to make sure you borrow enough to get through that entire academic year. So you're not having to reapply, have them check your credit again and go through all of that, just all of that process. So if you do borrow enough to cover any indirect costs like personal expenses and books and travel and things like that, the school would send you a check once they get your loan funds in. So any loan that you borrow, whether it's a student loan or a parent loan, a private or a federal, the funds usually arrive to the school. They don't go to the parent or the student. The school applies any of those funds to tuition and fees and room and board first, which are the direct costs. And then if there's anything left over after that, they usually refund a check to the student or the parent, depending on who borrowed the loan, for any additional expenses that you might need. So really make sure to check with your college's financial aid office to see what is their specific process for borrowing and for refunds as well.
Okay. All right, great. And are loans typically in the student's name or in the parent's name? I mean, I'm guessing it's a mix depending on what you do.
Yeah, I mean, that can really depend. Students can borrow a small federal student loan in their name each year. So it's a fairly easy loan to get. The maximum you can borrow as a first-time freshman is $5,500. So it's not a huge amount, but if parents want students to start borrowing or start to earn credit, things like that, then they can certainly have the student borrow a small federal loan. There's no credit check for that loan. The FAFSA is required prior to borrowing, but there's no cosigner needed on that loan. There's private loans as well that can be in a student's name, but typically a parent would have to co-sign because it is a credit-based loan. It's a loan that you would do for a lender. Parents can borrow a federal parent loan. It's called a PLUS. That's just a parent loan for undergraduate students. That's a credit-based loan that parents can apply for, and that would be in their own name that they would borrow up, and they can borrow up to the child's cost of attendance for the year. So that one doesn't necessarily have a smaller limit. So they can borrow up to the cost of the year minus anything else that the student is receiving in terms of grants or loans.
Not that they should. I mean,
not that they should. Exactly. Search other means first.
Yes, yeah, try the other things first. So, and all right, so if tuition bills aren't due until August or September, when do students need to start applying for loans? I would think right away. That's my guess.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest questions we get on our phone calls is, when do we start doing all of this now that, May 1st is kind of the deadline. So after May 1st happens and they choose a school, what's next? Well, your credit is good for 180 days when you're applying for a credit-based loan, like a federal parent loan or a private loan through a lender. So, we encourage families to start applying for those loans as early as June, if you can. I mean, it can take several weeks to get everything approved. You may have to provide additional paperwork, tax information, wage information for those private loans. So you want to make sure you give yourself plenty of time to get all of those things done that need to be done. And you also want to make sure that you have to apply for loans each year. So I do get families saying, hey, should I borrow for the 4 years that I need? Or, what's the process? But your credit really is only good for 180 days or 6 months. So you do need to apply each year that you're needing to borrow to help pay those expenses. So each time you apply for a loan, you're usually applying in the summer before the academic year starts. And you're really only borrowing the amount that you need to cover that one academic year. So just kind of make sure you start the process, every June if loans are needed each year. And for federal loans, you need to make sure that you do fill out the FAFSA each fall, because that is a requirement for any of the federal parent or student loans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would really emphasize applying as early as you can. This was actually a family friend. She suddenly got denied a loan that she'd typically gotten, and so then they were scrambling, because she was doing it last minute, and it ended up working out. Various things came into play, and she actually ended up with a bigger grant, which I think was great, and really the ideal, because they were like, oh, you actually need more than we thought. But they were really panicked for a couple of days, and I was trying to figure out how to help them, although I'm not an expert in this side of things, but like giving them questions to ask. So do it early, figure it out early.
Yeah, and schools need time to get their paperwork done and get the money in from the bank or the government. So I think if you can start in June, you're doing perfect.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, great. And so how do families actually go ahead and apply for loans? Where do they look?
Yeah, a lot of it's going to depend on what type of loan the family is applying for. And again, we spend a lot of time on phone calls with families about the differences between the different private loans, federal loans, student, parent. If they're applying for either the federal student loan or the federal parent loan, so either federal loan, they do usually work directly with the school that the child is attending. The financial aid office there will let them know the steps they have to take to get the process complete. Or again, on the portal for the students, for the college portal, there's a lot of information usually on borrowing on those websites in the financial aid section. So again, just a reminder, the FAFSA is required each year if you would like to borrow federal student or parent loans. So you want to make sure you get that done every fall. Studentaid.gov is just the federal loan website or the federal student financial aid website. And that's a great website just in terms of information on that and the link for the FAFSA. Any private loans, the private loan is more of a, the parent will be the one that kind of drives that process. So they will contact the lender and apply directly through the lender's website. Usually the lender reaches out once approved, once the paperwork's done, then the lender reaches out to the school to let them know that this parent's been approved for this certain amount of money. So really make sure you're doing research on the lenders and the loans that are available to figure out what's best for you, if interest rates are more important, if fees are important, if repayment options are important. So the school's information or the school's website can a lot of times have information on various private loans too. So you can always go to the schools that your child's attending, type in private loan, in their search bar, just to see if they have a list of different private lenders, if that's something that you're interested in. There's websites, Student Loan Hero, bankrate.com. You can use some of those to research private loans and the different interest rates. So, and then depending on the state your child's going to school in or the state that you're from, definitely check to see if that state offers any private loans through the state itself, like we had kind of said earlier. So those can have lower interest rates. Sometimes they can have good repayment options. They can have no fees. So regardless of what loan you choose, the money will usually be sent directly to the school to pay for your child's direct costs. So you won't be getting any money until those costs are paid for. And then if there's any left over, those would be sent to you from the school itself.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what are some things to look for when researching loans? I mean, I admit that like alarm bells go off, because I do, you read the articles. I know the average is not actually that everybody's borrowing like, $100,000, but let's kind of talk about things to think about when you're researching all these loans.
Yeah, and we do really recommend to do your research before you borrow. I mean, for private loans, definitely shop around, do some research. You can apply for multiple lenders, if you're looking at private loans, just to see what kind of interest rates you can get, because with private loans, your interest rate is based on your credit. Whereas federal loans, the student loan and the parent loan, those are set by the government each year. So if you're interested in private loans, make sure you're shopping around, looking at what the current interest rates are. Depending on your credit, you can definitely apply for more than one, but just make sure you're applying, for all those loans maybe in the same week or the same time frame, so it's not dinging your credit each time you apply. But one of the things you want to think about is how much you need. Think about borrowing in general from that lender for the remainder of your child's undergrad. So, you don't necessarily want to go from one private lender to another private lender, for all 4 years. And when they graduate, you're going to have 4 different payments to 4 different lenders. So one thing to think about is to kind of continue with that same lender as the 4 years go by. So you'll have one payment that you'll make after the 4 years are done to the same lender. You want to know what your interest rate is. So again, federal loans, the government sets those interest rates each year, but private loans, it's based on your credit. So, and if you don't have great credit, you might want to think about applying with a cosigner or an endorser to get better credit or better interest rates. And then pay attention to the fine print. Not many people think about what's going to happen when they're repaying the loans. They think about, I just need to get a loan to get myself through college. I just need to borrow right now. And they don't think about what's going to happen after they've graduated and, get a job and that sort of thing. So, as a parent too, think about, are there any caps to the amounts that you can borrow? So, with private loans, sometimes if you get to the point where you're borrowing $70,000 or $60,000 a year, you may not be able to borrow for that last year because you've reached a cap limit that they won't allow you to borrow anymore. So know if there's any aggregate loan limits to the amount to make sure that you can cover all 4 years of your child's undergrad. Find out if there's any origination fees, depending on the lender and your credit. What is their repayment term in years? Do they offer 10 years, 15 years, 20, 25 years for repayment? So if that's important to you. Some private lenders have fixed versus variable interest rates, so they'll offer you both depending on what you want to do. Typically, payments aren't required while your child's in school for those 4 years, but again, that's something you want to make sure of if you don't want to make payments for those 4 years. Are there options to postpone payments? So with the federal student and parent loans, they do give you some options for postponing payments should the student go back to school or should parents fall into financial distress. A lot of private lenders don't offer that. So that's something to definitely look into if you're looking into private loans, if something happens financially. A question you don't really want to answer or ask is what happens to the loan if your student should die or become totally or permanently disabled? Is that loan canceled? Are you still responsible for it? So again, some private lenders don't do that. Federal loans, they will do that. So just things to think about it. If you're borrowing for the entire year, can you cancel any of that if you don't need the loan? So if your child gets some scholarships in that second term and you don't need all of that loan, will the lender let you return it? Can you send money back if it's not needed? So there's lots of things to look at. And I think it's really important, depending on how much you're borrowing, to really decide what is best for your family. Is the federal government loans better? Are the private loans going to be better? The repayment options, the interest rates, the fees. It's talk with us too. We're happy to talk with people one-on-one with a college coach, finance expert, and go over that information.
Well, actually, I should say these aren't our corporate clients, so they. So what I would say is post. But what you can do is we answer listener questions. So absolutely post questions about this. You can post it on our Facebook, etc. And we're really, really happy to answer it. There's a lot of good information on our blog post, blog.getintocollege.com. Yep. So absolutely.
And schools' financial aid offices are usually really great too, just to help give out information on different loans or, with their websites, doing some research on that too. So there's a good place to get information too.
Yeah, I'm going to give a tip there. I think people are always really freaked out when they call financial aid offices. And so they're like, they can be really rude. If you're persistent but polite, you're going to get a lot farther. That's absolutely my recommendation.
There's a lot, just in all the years I've worked in schools, a lot of students were afraid to talk to us. Parents didn't want to call. I mean, you're talking about finances. A lot of people don't want to do that, but we always try to be as helpful as we could and give out the best information we had. So, I mean, it's a good idea to check in with them if you have questions.
Right. But just keep in mind that they might make a lot less than you do, actually. So don't assume that they're just because you're paying a lot to the school that they're rolling in it. So.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So that was great, Chrissy. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks, Sally. I'm glad I could be here today and have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, me too. All right. So we're now going to take a short break. And when we return, we'll be talking with Lisa Albro, college coach veteran, about the early application plans to colleges.